Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. It is the Thursday edition of Point of View. In this hour, we're going to spend some time, just a few minutes, talking with State Senator Angela Paxton. But before we do so, a couple of things I wanted to focus on. If you go to our website, one of the first articles you will find is an analysis that was done by the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, which is a mouthful. But basically what they have done is when they have gone to these protests and riots, they've tried to figure out who they're linked to. And 95% of them, according to their estimates, are linked back to the BLM movement, what's called Black Lives Matter movement. And so that is the case, resulting in, interestingly enough, 47 fatalities. And if you want the exact numbers, of course, you can get this from the first article we've posted on the website. The project documented 12,000 plus incidents of civil unrest since May 26th to September 5th, and found 633 incidents were coded as riots. So you know that we are talking about both protest and riots. And when they're coded as riots, we've talked about this before, it is done by the police, because once you have a riot in many of these particular metropolitan areas, if it's considered a riot, then you can use things like tear gas, pepper spray, and a variety of other things. So anyway, that's the case. The perpetrators' identities were not listed in 51 of the incidents, but the reality is that you basically have BLM activists involved in 95% of them. I actually called this piece cost and link to the riots. So we've talked about the link. The numbers for the cost are going up significantly. The best estimate is that these riots that have taken place will cost more than the 1992 Rodney King riots, which took place in Los Angeles. When adjusted for inflation, those riots cost an estimated $1.2 billion with a B. So if you assume that to be the case, and we're not just talking about Portland, Oregon, of course, Minneapolis and others, but even small towns like Wichita, Kansas, Gilbert, Arizona. Just a minute, I'm going to talk about Lancaster, Pennsylvania, or they say Lancaster is the way you're supposed to say it when you're in Pennsylvania. And we'll get into that issue, because in this particular case, the judge in Pennsylvania, not exactly like the judge in Portland, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Has this had an impact? That is another survey that was very interesting, because that's the second article we've posted here. It's entitled Rasmussen Poll, Black Lives Matter Riots Turning People in Riot Zones to Trump Voters. No surprise there, but again, the work that has been done by the survey done by Rasmussen Poll found that 63% of voters who have seen violent protests in their community strongly approve of the president. And you can understand why. The survey suggests that President Trump's law and order message is resonating with voters who've had to deal with the riots. It appears that the more racial unrest these voters see, the less open they are towards some of the things that have been espoused by the Democratic Party. You can go down into some of the specifics here. According to Rasmussen, the law and order issue is very important to individuals. 65% say the violent protests are important to their vote in this presidential election. 41% say it's very important, and you can go through all sorts of other aspects of that. And so these are the first two articles that I thought I might mention. We will come back to that in the National Hour, but it also leads to something very interesting, a commentary that came out by Jonathan Jones. And that is, he says, when you think of Portland, Oregon, you think of, as he says, a city that has sort of become the Wild West. He says, in fact, at this juncture, Portland has become synonymous with rioting and other forms of violent civil unrest. But then he fast forwards to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which was plunged into chaos on Monday morning, because, as you may be familiar, there was an individual who was lunging towards officers with a knife. We have the video account of that, and yet even though we have the body camera footage, which leaves no doubt that this man is manic and armed with a knife and ready to try to kill officers, as you might imagine, because he was a person of color, Hispanic, then all sorts of protests popped up in the city of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. But the difference came when you then had to appear before the judge, because the judge in that particular community didn't give the rioters the what he calls Portland treatment. As a matter of fact, the magisterial district judge, Bruce Roth, threw the book at the members of this unruly mob. On Monday, he set bail for 9 of those arrested on suspicion of rioting at $1 million per person, while another alleged rioter had his bail set at $100,000. As you might guess, none of the 10 defendants could afford to get out of jail. And so you've had various groups actually protesting that. But interestingly enough, Monday night, you had another protest, but I love exactly how Jonathan Jones puts it. But in a plot twist that shouldn't shock a single person on this planet, the demonstrators returned Monday night. According to Penn Live, they actually remain peaceful. He says it's almost as if the threat of punishment worked as a deterrent, helping to prevent another round of property damage, which could have led to endless rioting and deaths. Some people say, well, when they protest and riot, what can we do? Well, I don't know. Why don't we take a page off of this judge that decided to make it very painful for those individuals? And as a matter of fact, those individuals staying in jail weren't out there protesting or rioting. And so there you go. Just before we take a break and spend some time talking with State Senator Angela Paxton. The other day, I did very quickly talk about the testimony by Li Ming-yan, the individual arguing that this coronavirus actually might have been deliberately engineered in the lab there in China, in the military lab. And the paper is now out. And there are still a lot of virologists that are still skeptical about this. What do you mean when it's in the lab? Come from the lab could simply mean, as she's describing, that as you work in a laboratory, there are some things you can do to hasten any kind of, if you will, kind of natural variation. You know, basically what he says, hasten the natural process of natural selection using toxins, stress, ultraviolet light, all sorts of things. So when we say made in the lab, does that mean genetically pick and choose all the pieces? Or does it simply mean that they were trying to make it a little more infectious? And again, as some people have said, if the goal is in China was to try to actually engineer a virus that would be really bad, so far we don't see that it's a bioweapon that's as effective as you might expect it to be, but also it's a whole lot more infectious than it was before. So anyway, we'll see where this goes, but I wanted to just give you an update of this report from Dr. Li Ming-yan, who is a person that has looked at this and convinced that the genome suggests that it was engineered. We will see where that goes. But better to talk about it and maybe even critique it than to ignore it like most of the mainstream press is doing. Let's take a break. We got a lot more to cover. We will do so right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Less than 2 months before a national election, lawsuits are being filed to change election laws. In Georgia, the law used to require that absentee ballots that arrived after Election Day were to be set aside and eventually destroyed. A federal judge now has ordered Georgia officials to count all ballots postmarked by Election Day, even if they arrive days later. A similar injunction has been filed in Pennsylvania. A lawsuit in Ohio is challenging the need for verifying a signature. Minnesota waived a rule that absentee ballots must be signed by a witness. Lawyers for the Trump campaign have challenged that decision. All of this legal activity is due to the fact that we may see a major amount of absentee ballot rejections. The Associated Press estimates that if states reject these ballots at the same rate as the 2020 primaries, up to 3 times as many voters in the battleground states could have their votes discarded. A survey by NPR discovered that 558,000 absentee votes were tossed out during the 2020 primaries. For example, Wisconsin had 23,000 ballots discarded. In 2016, Donald Trump won Wisconsin by 22,000 votes. It is easy to see where this will lead if we have a close election. The loser will challenge the fact that thousands of ballots were rejected and call for the state to count every vote. The debate will surely end up in the courts, which is why the editors of the Wall Street Journal ask, will courts pick the next president? If you want your vote to count in this election, the best solution is to vote in person. Second best is to get a ballot early, fill it out carefully, and mail it early. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Racism, go to viewpoints.info/racism. That's viewpoints.info/racism. Point of View Truth Team on changing truth in uncertain times.
Hi, this is Michael Ferris. I am the President, CEO, and General Counsel of Alliance Defending Freedom, and I've been friends with Point of View Radio for decades. This is such a great radio ministry. I am personally a partner with Point of View, and I would encourage each of you to be a partner. Point of View gets information in a timely fashion to people who need to know the truth, and Point of View brings you the truth. It brings you a Christian perspective on the news, and it calls you to prayer and action in a timely manner. I'll never forget the day that freedom was preserved in the homeschool arena because of the work of Point of View Radio, leading the charge on that. And so always been grateful for that and would encourage you to be a part of the Point of View team. God bless you.
Again, Unchanging Truth in Uncertain Times, Truth Team 2020, and we certainly do encourage your financial support. You can give us a call at 800-347-5151. Of course, the website is pointofview.net. Might just mention that a very significant number of you listening this hour are in the state of Texas, and it is North Texas Giving Day, so if you've been waiting till Thursday, this would be a great opportunity for you to give to this ministry. And we are now privileged to spend a little bit of time talking with State Senator Angela Paxton, individual that actually represents the Senate District 8, a graduate of Baylor University, also earned a master's degree from the University of Houston Clear Lake, and had 22 years of a career in education, and joins us now by phone. So, Angela Paxton, always great to have you on the program.
Hi, Kirby. It's really great to be here.
Let's talk education because, of course, that is one of your areas of expertise. A little bit later, I want to talk about Back the Blue because I saw you were signing a document from Governor Greg Abbott. And maybe just since you are married to Ken Paxton, he's been looking at these mail-in ballots out of Houston and Harris County, so I might get to that a little bit later. But education is, of course, an issue that is of great concern to you. And I've been looking at the sales tax revenues and oil revenues, and given the fact that a majority of the budget for the state of Texas deals with education, you're going to have to really begin to figure out how to tighten the belt maybe in some other areas so that we can still provide quality education for these kids in the public schools.
Well, that's really true, and I think, of course, you're right about education being a large expenditure of our state funds. In fact, if you look at the way we spend state revenue, education, K through 12 and higher ed is the single largest allocation of funds, other than when you bring healthcare in, which also includes federal funds. But,
right.
Education is one of the, classic 4 core responsibilities of government, along with infrastructure, public safety, and our court system. So it's critical that we make sure that we are funding our schools, that we're, taking seriously our responsibility to provide a system of free public education in Texas.
One of the things that we've been talking about is some of the testimony that's been before the State Board of Education. Now, I recognize that right now we're talking to you, and you're not actually running for State Board, but you know those individuals that do. But I think it brings us, Angela, down to the point that maybe some people will know who's running for the presidency. They'll know who's running for the U.S. Senate. They might know their member of Congress. Sadly, they may or may not know the state senator, state representative, but they haven't even thought about the school board or even the State Board of Education. And yet lately they've been looking at issues ranging from whether or not we want to begin to teach a more explicit sex education, LGBT issues, and all the rest. So this is an election where, in some respects, we are asking individuals, if they're concerned about education, to look further down on that ballot and recognize that some things that are going to affect their kids and grandkids are going to be determined on November 3rd.
That is so important, Kirby, and I'm so glad you bring it up. And, this is one of the things that is a little bit different in this upcoming election, November 3rd. Number one, we don't have the straight ticket voting this time. So people who maybe in the past they voted a straight Republican ticket or straight Democrat ticket, they will not be able to do that this time. They must individually select every race. In addition to that, we have standardized the election date. And so on this ballot in November, there will also be municipal elections and school board elections, things that in the past have been separated and typically been in the month of May or something like that. And so one of the things I've been saying, I'm not alone in this. I think a lot of people who understand the significance of the further down the ballot you go, in many ways, the further down the ballot you go, the more directly these people's decisions affect you and your family in your daily life because they're more local. And so we're encouraging people to vote all the way from the White House to the courthouse to the schoolhouse. Just as you mentioned, there are going to be city council folks on the ballot, school board on the ballot. And these things really, really matter in daily life.
Let's talk for just a minute. We had Kathy Ward here on Monday, and we said all sorts of nice things about you, so maybe you can say some nice things about her. But you, too, are actually part of a victory project. I think she told us that already they've knocked on, 17,000 doors and made, I think it was more than 70,000 phone calls. A lot of our listeners might say, well, what can I do to make a difference? And there is an opportunity for you to join with a group or just individually. First of all, make sure that people are registered to vote, because that has to happen before October 5th. Number two, to really encourage them to educate themselves about these issues. And we have a link to iVoter Guide and all sorts of other things that'll be on our website. And there are many others you can find as well. And then number three, just to make sure that they go out and vote, because as you well know, there are a lot of people that say, well, I really appreciate what these individuals that you've had on the program do, but I forgot about voting, or it just seemed too difficult, or what difference does one vote make? Of course, we've had Matt Shaheen in here. He won by 0.5%. Jeff Leach won by 1.5%. So I think most people recognize their vote counts. But talk about that, because you've been really trying to mobilize people to make sure that people are registered to vote and beginning to think about the fact that this is a very important election.
It is a very important election. And, of course, being a presidential election, it does get more attention than a lot of, in the off years and such. But it really is true that, there are going to be people who go in and they vote for the president. Every single race matters. Every single race is putting someone in a position to reflect your values or not. And if you don't vote, you're just conceding such an important, I believe, biblical civic responsibility to do your best. It's kind of interesting. I've heard people say, there's sometimes that they're just not sure about people or whatever. I mean, the best you can do is number one, pray, and number two, as you said, educate yourself about the issues. And there are great resources like iVoter Guide. You mentioned my dear friend Kathy Ward. We're the co-chairs for the Collin County GOP victory effort, which is aimed at getting Republicans elected to all the way down the ballot. And Kathy, again, I just saw her last night. Was just always a delight to see her. She brings tremendous energy and fervor, incredible work ethic, and she's really smart about what she does and very strategic. And so I'm just thrilled to be working with her on the Collin County effort. But one of the things I've always reminded people is, you have to be registered to vote in order to vote. Make sure that not only you are registered to vote, make sure all of the eligible voters in your household are registered to vote and that they show up to the polls. That multiplies your vote. Instead of just one person in a household, it might be 5, it might be 3. But when you look at the multiplicative effect of making sure that the people that you know that hold the same values as you, number one, are registered, and number two, that you take personal responsibility for making sure that you remind them to go to the polls, offer to drive them, etc., that it really does matter.
Let's take a break, and as we go to a break, this would be a great time for you to join with us, because as we have said before, we are dependent upon your financial gifts to bring this program to you every day. And if you appreciate some of the conversation we've had this week with Candy Noble and Kathy Ward, and yesterday Van Taylor, today Angela Paxton, I would encourage you to visit our website, pointofview.net. As we said before, if you would like to join us at the Truth Team level, that's $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 a year. We provide you a number of things, including this flash drive that has about 140 different articles, interviews, all sorts of resources, and that's our thank you to you. Of course, you'll also receive the Outlook magazine. At the $50 a month level, you also receive that, as well as, here's one of the most recent booklets on voter fraud, which we can talk about a little bit later as well. So this is a great opportunity for you as we go to a break to give us a call. That number is 800-347-5151, or of course you can visit the website pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
Everything you do should reflect who you are. The way you spend your time, your posts on social media, the investments you make for your retirement and for the future of our nation. Point of View Radio keeps you and countless people informed in a time when you almost need a personal research assistant to see if what you heard on the news is really true. Our team is here to help, but we need your help right now as this week heads to an end. We need monthly team members, what we call our Truth Team, as we head into the last part of 2020. It's been a unique year, to say the least, and unfortunately, it's likely to get even crazier. Make sure that you and others have the information you need to reflect who you are and to bring blessing to our land. And remember, as Kerby said, today your gift will be matched, doubled. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. Unchanging truth in uncertain times. Point of View Radio. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, some of you that actually receive emails from us may have received an email from Warren Kelly, who is the president of Point of View Ministries. And in that, he reminds us that today is North Texas Giving Day. So if you would like to give to this organization and this ministry, we would certainly encourage you to do so. That number is 800-347-5151. Also, pointofview.net. He also encourages you to join the Truth Team and maybe to read the email email message we had sent out before by me, and also to pray for this nation. And so now we are going to continue our conversation for a few more minutes with State Senator Angela Paxton. And I might just mention that my commentary today is talking about discarded ballots. It turns out that if indeed states reject ballots during the general election at the rate that they've been rejecting them during the 2020 primaries, primarily in the Democratic primaries, you would have an enormous number of absentee votes that would be rejected, 558,000 rejected during the primaries alone. So in just a minute, I want to get into the whole issue of mail-in ballots and those kinds of things. But Angela Paxton, before we do so, let's, if we can, talk about the police. We have already, before you've come on the program, talked about some of the protests and the riots. But what I found so interesting is that the governor, Greg Abbott, created a document which he signed, and then I saw you on Facebook signing it as well. And what it is a document to, first of all, affirm your support of the police. And it was coming out in part because the Austin City Council decided to actually take, I think it was about $150 billion out of the police fund. And he's begun to say, if you're going to do that, then maybe we should cap the amount of taxes you can bring in. Maybe we should allow various communities that have been annexed to remove that. So talk about this battle over the police, which I'm sure will surface at the next legislative session.
Well, I think it absolutely will. And again, I talked a little earlier about with education being one of the core functions of government. It's one of our core responsibilities to make sure that we're providing for that, a system for that. And of course, public safety is a core function of government as well. And, one of the things that sometimes people may not remember, but cities and counties are created by the state. It's interesting the way our system of government is. The states created the federal government at the beginning of our country, and the states within themselves have their own mechanisms for creating these various municipalities, jurisdictions. And so when a city like the city of Austin is refusing basically to do its duty, then we have the ability as a state to step in. And there have been some great commentaries that you've probably seen in the news. First of all, I think initially questioning if it was constitutional for the governor to even suggest such a thing. But it looks like it is. And we are very thankful that we have a governor that would step in and do that. If we are going to defund police, then we need to refund our taxpayers, because this is part of the basic services that you're paying for is a safe community.
And again, when we've looked at some of this at the national level, where you have some of these sanctuary cities, some of them, by the way, in the state of Texas as well, but certainly around the country. And if, again, you're not going to enforce the laws, then what's government there for in the first place? So whether it's the national level and what President Trump has wanted to do, or as you point out at the state level, what the governor and the legislature wants to do, who would have guessed that one of the big issues facing you when you go back to Austin in January is whether or not to fund the police. I mean, that was sort of a given. If there's anything we've always assumed, that we need people in law enforcement to keep us safe. And in the next hour, I'm going to talk about how some of the city council members are saying in Minneapolis, well, what happened here? We can't seem to find the police. Well, when you defund the police don't show up. And so it's the same kind of issue. And that, of course, is going to be front and center. So education is certainly going to be one. Certainly law enforcement is going to be another. But I thought for just a minute before I let you go, since you are married to Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, he's also been paying attention to the fact that in Harris County, they decided that they were going to send more than 1 million ballots out, unsolicited ballot applications, I should say, unsolicited. And whether you look at the topic that I've been addressing, voter fraud, or whether you just look at just the A problem that I talk about in today's commentary on discarded ballots. There is a very good reason why the Attorney General, and I'm sure you and a variety of other people in the legislature, say we just cannot allow one particular county or one particular city to violate the law and to change the election laws in midstream. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, this goes back to the rule of law, and I'm really proud of my husband. Ken's done a fantastic job as Attorney General, really paying attention to these things. And, one of the things that's kind of interesting where we are right now, the legislature is not in session. So we can make laws when we are in session. We are not right now. And so that means that's why you see the governor acting. You see Ken as the Attorney General of Texas acting. They aren't constrained by a legislative session. But they are constrained by the law, or at least they are supposed to be. And I'm really proud of how Ken has really stood for the rule of law throughout his career, regardless of the position he's been in. But, it's important for people to understand that mail-in ballots, that is where the largest percentage of fraud happens.
Yes.
And that is acknowledged from the left and the right. In fact, the Democrats brought that as part of the evidence when they have fought certain kinds of things along the way. It's like, no, that's where all the fraud happens. And now they're flipping sides and trying to push for this. But mail-in ballots are different than absentee ballots. What Harris County was trying to do, those are not the same. They are, absentee ballots are provided for in law for people that are unable to get to the polls because they're going to be out of town or traveling or military, et cetera, or they're disabled. That's what that's for. We have a provision for those kinds of things. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about doing something that is not provided for in the law.
And I think the point that I would make also is that there are a few states that have elections entirely by mail, and that's Colorado and Utah and Oregon and Washington and Hawaii. But in Colorado and Washington in particular, it took years to get the system right and to have it effectively used. And here, changing the rules in midstream, changing the rules in mid-election makes no sense at all. So just before I go, let's, if we can, mention the fact that we have a link to your website, angelapaxton.com. Listen, learn, and lead. And those are resources. So if somebody would like to contact you, express their opinion, invite you to come and speak, we have a link to Angela Paxton, Texas State Senator for the 8th District. And as always, it's just a delight to have you on the program with us.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to connect with your listeners. And I'd also just point out our Facebook page is Angela Paxton TX. And while we've been on the air, the governor has been actually issuing a new executive order regarding reopening of Texas. We're going to move to 75% on Monday, along with some other some things that will be, I know people will be interested in seeing, including nursing home visitation opening back up and elective surgeries, et cetera. So I'd encourage everyone to go to my Facebook page. We'll be posting the executive order there.
And I might just mention we do have a link to your Facebook page, your Twitter feed, as well as the website. So it's all right there at our website, pointofview.net. And an announcement, you heard it here first, right here on Point of View. Senator Angela Paxton, thank you so very much for being with us today here on Point of View.
Thanks, Kerby. God bless you.
Just before we take a break, let's talk about a couple of things. First of all, if you said, I'm hearing all sorts of things I didn't know before, and you might want to know a little bit more about what's happening in Texas politics. Of course, a little bit later, we're going to be on our nationwide program talking, first of all, with Gary Bauer. He'll be with us in about a half an hour. And then we also have Phil Robertson. Duck Dynasty will be with us, his new book coming out. So there are all sorts of resources that we'll be talking about in the national hour. But at the moment here, since so many of you listen in the state of Texas, I'm not ignoring those of you in Minneapolis and a few other places, but by and large, most of our listeners are in Texas. From time to time, I like to talk about Texas politics because it also applies to your state as well. And if you believe that this is something that is going to be helpful to you and make a difference in the culture and in your community, let me again challenge you to consider what you might do to join us at the Truth Team level. It's $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 a year. And again, we're sending you the flash drive. You get the Outlook magazine. And if you'd like to know a little bit more about that, go to the website, pointofview.net. There's a banner that says Unchanging Truth in Uncertain Times. And then you will see the different giving levels at $30 a month or $50 a month. Or if you'd like to talk to someone and have them walk you through that, that number is 800-347-5151. Truth Team 2020. We come back. I want to talk about Netflix and cuties. That coming up right after this.
Point of View Truth Team, Unchanging Truth in Uncertain Times.
Going through the stations and caught Kerby and a very interesting topic. So just listening to it, and so just by hearing the topic, I can relate to some of those topics. But it has impacted my life a lot. I enjoy listening to the station.
Thank you so very much. Again, some comments from some of our listeners. We might have a chance to hear from some others in just a few minutes. But let me, if I can, address this issue of Netflix. And the first thing I want to say, and I even saw this with Jim Dennison saying, well, I haven't seen it. Well, that's fine. Many of these people haven't seen it, but I do know people. Michael Knowles has been on this program with us. He's seen it. Mark Davis has seen it. A variety of people I know have. So, I don't have to stick my head in a sewer to know what's down there. And we think we are pretty aware of what this is. And since since we've had a chance to hear from people that have taken the time to see it. Netflix, of course, has been video streaming a lot of things that have been fairly controversial, but this time the film Cuties seems to have gone over the top. And so Tony Perkins, points out the fact that now we have even individuals like Senator Ted Cruz in a letter to the Attorney General William Barr calling for an investigation as to whether or not it broke any laws related to child pornography. Again, I've been reading some of the things people have written about what's shown. There is pretty gross stuff. I couldn't say most of it on the air and wouldn't want to anyway. And Tony Perkins points out that Netflix has been really very much entwined with an agenda for the sexual revolution. So let's go to a couple people. Katrina Trinko says, so apparently now it's a partisan value to be against pedophilia because she points out, and she has all sorts of quotes. You've seen them before, and if not, just go out there on the website and type it in. There are all sorts of people criticizing the so-called Christian right or just the new right or conservatives about their obsession with this particular movie and film. And the bottom line is we're not obsessed with it. We just know it's gross, and that is the case. And Katrina Trinko raised a good question. 3 years after the earthquake of the hashtag #MeToo movement. Remember that? That's where Hollywood supposedly learned some lessons about consent and treating women well. This Netflix streaming service is now vigorously defending Cuties, a movie that shows female child actresses being in various sexually provocative poses and dances, and again, I just almost can't use some of the words on the air that are described here. And so, as you might probably imagine, there are quite a number of people that have been complaining about that, but they aren't just on the right. Nancy Pelosi's daughter, Christine Pelosi, hi Netflix, from a customer and former ADA for the San Francisco District Attorney's Child Abuse Sexual Assault Unit. She says, this is Nancy Pelosi's daughter, by the way, Christine Pelosi. If you're not familiar with her, I've seen interviews with her. She says, Cuties hypersexualizes girls my daughter's age, no doubt to the delight of pedophiles like the ones I prosecuted. Cancel this, apologize, work with experts to heal your harm. So that comes, from, if you will, people on the other side of the aisle, if you will. But what I think Katrina Trinko points out is there's just a lot of silence. For example, silence from her mother. That would be the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. Nothing. Silence from the Obamas. Now, Katrina Trinko points that out because the Obamas have a multi-million-dollar deal with Netflix. And they've been sort of silent. Remember the phrase that you hear out there in the riots, silence is violence? But everybody's pretty silent about this right now on the left. Again, high praise for Christina Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's daughter, because she did speak out. But isn't that interesting, And then she ends the piece by saying, we always hear from people on the left that basically we're on the right side of history. The left is on the right side of history. The implied is those of you that are in the middle, those of you on the right, you're on the wrong side of history. But right now, the left stays quiet about Cuties, she says. It's become clear that we will have conservatives to thank, not liberals, if sexual exploitation of children does not become the new normal in Hollywood. One other comment, and this again comes from one of the other people that's been on this program with us, our good friend Jim Dennison. Dr. Jim Dennison has written about this today. And again, he says, look, I'll start with an admission. I did not see the movie, but again, he says, I don't have to contract cancer to warn you not to contract cancer. Okay, so I love his line there. And he, if you want to go to the daily article, actually pulls from the Internet Movie Database some of the scenes. I just can't read some of those because it's talking about pulling down garments, doing certain things, showing certain things on a phone, which we would call sexting and everything else. I honestly can't say on radio what is described there. And he's done a pretty good job of putting the word body in for the actual parts that are in there. And it's just pretty amazing how decadent it has become. So anyway, a little bit later, he points out that several members of Congress have called for the Justice Department to take action. Also reminds us that one of the presidential candidates on the Democratic side, that would be Tulsi Gabbard, actually has warned the movie will certainly whet the appetite of pedophiles and help fuel the child sex trafficking trade, and has canceled her Netflix account. Christine Pelosi, I just mentioned her as well. The National Center for Sexual Exploitation said, while we commend the director for exposing the very real threat to young girls having unfettered access to social media and the internet, we cannot condone the hypersexualization and exploitation of the young actresses themselves, to make a point. And I think we come back to a kind of a biblical view. What's that? Sexual exploitation of children is wrong. And that's due to a lot of things, but how about Psalm 127, that children are a heritage from the Lord? So anyway, that is just another resource for you in a ongoing issue, and it is sad to me that standing up for the innocence of children and criticizing the hypersexualization of children has, in this particular case, even become a partisan issue. So, if nothing else, it's one more reason why I hope that, especially as we're coming to the end of our first hour, and it's during North Texas Giving Day, which I'm not going to mention next hour because we are now then broadcasting to more than just Texas stations, that indeed, when we are trying to educate you about some of these very important issues, that I hope that you believe that it is important to educate you about those issues. And there's a couple of ways that you can join with us, because after all, your gift will help impact the culture. It will help us educate you so that you can be empowered to make a difference in your community. And so we want to bring as many facts and pieces of information to you as well. You're going to see that we've posted some things today on the cost and links of the riots. I'll come back to that in the next hour. Voters and the riots. Also, this one, vote for Biden or else. This is a new one. I mentioned one yesterday from one of the news magazines. This one is an opinion piece in the Washington Examiner that goes beyond even the email that you received from me and the article that we posted yesterday. And I did post one on just former Vice President Joe Biden's gun control claim. Some of the things he said after this tragic shooting in New York City are just factually wrong. You are certainly entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And it is sad to say that many people promoting things like gun control just don't have their facts correct. And that's why we've posted that as well. So if you find yourself saying, I really appreciate the material that you make available to us, the interviews that, for example, we'll be doing in a few minutes with Gary Bauer, please go to the website, pointofview.net. It is, of course, North Texas Giving Day, so those of you in the state of Texas, I would certainly want to hear from you. And the number, of course, is 800-347-5151. And as I've mentioned before, for your gift of as little as $1 a day or more, you will certainly receive this flash drive as well as the Outlook magazine. And for even higher levels of $50 a month, you'll receive these booklets in the mail as we send them out every single month. Please go to the website. It is 800-347-5151, pointofview.net. Truth Team 2020 will be back right after this.
Everything you do should reflect who you are. The way you spend your time, your posts on social media, the investments you make for your retirement, and for the future of our nation. Point of View Radio keeps you and countless people informed in a time when you almost need a personal research assistant to see if what you heard on the news is really true. Our team is here to help, but we need your help right now as this week heads to an end. We need monthly team members, what we call our Truth Team, as we head into the last part of 2020. It's been a unique year, to say the least, and unfortunately, it's likely to get even crazier. Make sure that you and others have the information you need to reflect who you are and to bring blessing to our land. And remember, as Kerby said, today your gift will be matched, doubled. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. Unchanging truth in uncertain times. Point of View Radio, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the Thursday edition of Point of View. And for those of you that remember Marlon Maddox, he was, of course, the founder and the original host of Point of View. He would oftentimes come on the program and talk about his file. And this one comes from one of those old files. This is so crazy, it is hard to say it with a straight face file. And what it is what now is being called as the Minneapolis effect. And that is, if you've been watching what has been surfacing over the last couple of days, the city council members there in Minneapolis actually held a hearing in which they pressed the police officer and the police chief why there was such an uptick in crimes. Gee, I wonder why. And a lot of the residents of Minneapolis and the suburbs were asking, where are the police? Well, I think we know why, but let me try to explain that real quickly, and then we'll get into some other issues. And that is just ignoring Minneapolis for a minute. If you look at Chicago, in late May, all of a sudden the number of homicides just went through the roof. Matter of fact, on May 31st, 18 people were murdered just in one day, and July was Chicago's most violent month. So first you got May, June, July, and murder is up 52%. Then when you go and look at some of these other cities you've known at after May, this has jumped significantly. And so you've had these anti-police protests, but you've also had the end of what used to be called proactive policing. That's where police departments would oftentimes do what they could to maybe have a street or vehicle stop in Minneapolis, Philadelphia, Chicago, New York, and things like that. And as a result, those have been an attempt to try to tamp down crime. And so one of the individuals writing about this, Paul Cassell, has come up with this idea of the Minneapolis effect. Now, you might remember when we had Heather McDonald on here, she talked about the Ferguson effect, that after the shooting of Michael Brown, there was a lot of evidence to suggest that a lot of police officers were kind of backing off. And the same thing here in Minneapolis, because they're no longer doing proactive policing, in part because they don't have as many police officers because they've cut it. So if you find yourself saying, why is crime up and where are the police? Maybe you need to go back and say, defund the police has an impact. And our first article we've posted for you today is a study that was done by a group with a long name, the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, which they concluded that about 95% of the riots this summer were linked to the BLM movement, Black Lives Matter movement. 12,000 incidents of civil unrest from May 26th to September 5th. 633 were coded as riots, because once they're coded as riots, that's when they can actually use pepper spray and also tear gas and a variety of others. And the estimate is, and this is in the first article we've posted for you, that these riots will cost more than the 1992 Rodney King riots in Los Angeles. Those, when adjusted for inflation, are pegged at $1.2 billion with a B. And in case you wonder that might have an impact on the election, well, that's the next article that we've posted by the Rasmussen Reports, which found that 63% of voters who have seen violent protests in their community strongly approve of the president, and 65% say these violent protests are important to their vote in the presidential election. So just wanted to put a few things on the table for you to think about. And as you are joining us today, let me just mention that in just a few minutes, we'll be talking with our good friend Gary Bauer will be with us. Next hour, we'll have Phil Robertson, but in studio with me this week, Brad Fisk. And this is Truth Team 2020.
It is.
And I thought I'd start out with some of the evidence we have on the cost, not only in terms of lives and property, but maybe even the cost in terms of the next election of these riots.
It could be very, very critical, this election that's coming up. And it's important if you really believe that it's true. And I think a lot of people are becoming very concerned about what's happening in our culture right now and what's going to happen with the elections. And we are encouraging you, because this is Truth Team Week. We do 2 weeks out of the year, Kerby, where we come to our friends and ask for financial support so we can keep doing what we're doing and do it better, more thoroughly, and have the information we all are going to need to have coming up in a couple of months. And so the phone number to call and make a pledge is 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. And we're encouraging you to give at that $1 a day level. That's $30 a month. That's our Truth Team level, or more, actually. And we would ask that you consider that. It's $30 a month, $360 for the year. You don't have to have the money in hand right now. It's just something you're making a pledge and a promise for. 800-347-5151. You can also go online at pointofview.net.
Let me just also mention, too, that your gift's going to have an impact on the culture, and we will be talking about that today. Well, Gary Bauer was just at the event that took place in the White House, so he'll talk a little bit about the Abraham Accords, and he'll explain what those are. But we also recognize that some of these issues aren't necessarily tied to the election, although in some respects I'm beginning to see more and more of these issues are on the ballot. We've said pro-life is on the ballot, worldview's on the ballot. Seems like even law and order's on the ballot. So we certainly want to educate you about those issues. But more importantly, just before we take a break and before we get Gary Bauer on, because whenever we have somebody like Gary Bauer, nobody wants to call. I understand that. I understand that because he's got so much good stuff to say. Then I want to encourage you to give us a call. And if nothing else, we brought in a few extra people, including a couple family members I'm looking at right now, to answer the calls because yesterday we were just about topped out, weren't we?
We were. And we so appreciate the progress that's been made so far. I will say this, though, Kerby, we're a little behind where we need to be by the end of the week.
Very true.
And so today needs to be a really big day. Would you consider a single gift of any amount, a monthly gift of any amount? A lot of people coming in at the $50 a month level. We've had several people give $1,000 or more. And certainly that is within reach of a lot of people listening right now. And on the other end of the scale, there's some people who are maybe out of work and financially challenged right now. Sit back, relax. Let us pray for you. Call us and tell us how we can pray. You don't have to give. Please don't put that pressure on your family. 800-347-5151. Who's going to be the early birds getting the worm here? Giving us a call. 800-347-5151. Also, you can go on the website at pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net.
Gary Bauer will be with us in just a minute. We're going to be talking about, of course, foreign policy and a number of other issues. Of course, he, as an individual that served under the Reagan administration as the Undersecretary of Education, later Chief Domestic Policy Advisor, and he's been kind of our eyes and ears there. But as we go to a break, I'm hoping that maybe a few of you are saying, well, I didn't even know you were listener supported. I run into that all the time, Brad. People say, you mean you're supported by listeners? I think we've said it enough. Yes. And so maybe there are some of you that have never donated before. Just even a single gift would be something. And if you find yourself saying, well, maybe you're going to have to walk me through that, feel free to make that phone call because you'll have people at the other end, and many of whom are everything from family members to friends of this ministry, staff members here, 800-347-5151, and they'll help walk you through it. And it will only take a few minutes, won't it?
It will, just a couple of minutes. Remember, $1 a day or more, you're on the Truth Team, and we have a thumb drive that we'll tell you more about as the broadcast unfolds.
We certainly will. I'll hold it up here for those of you who haven't seen it. And, of course, we've been talking about it the last couple of days, but you can go to the website and see what the giving levels are. But I would encourage you to give us a call right now because Gary Bauer is going to be with us in just a minute. So, again, that number, 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Less than 2 months before a national election, lawsuits are being filed to change election laws. In Georgia, the law used to require that absentee ballots that arrived after Election Day were to be set aside and eventually destroyed. A federal judge now has ordered Georgia officials to count all ballots postmarked by Election Day, even if they arrive days later. A similar injunction has been filed in Pennsylvania. A lawsuit in Ohio is challenging the need for verifying a signature. Minnesota waived a rule that absentee ballots must be signed by a witness. Lawyers for the Trump campaign have challenged that decision. All of this legal activity is due to the fact that we may see a major amount of absentee ballot rejections. The Associated Press estimates that if states reject these ballots at the same rate as the 2020 primaries, up to 3 times as many voters in the battleground states could have their votes discarded. A survey by NPR discovered that 558,000 absentee votes were tossed out during the 2020 primaries. For example, Wisconsin had 23,000 ballots discarded. In 2016, Donald Trump won Wisconsin by 22,000 votes. It is easy to see where this will lead if we have a close election. The loser will challenge the fact that thousands of ballots were rejected and call for the state to count every vote. The debate will surely end up in the courts, which is why the editors of the Wall Street Journal ask, will courts pick the next president? If you want your vote to count in this election, the best solution is to vote in person. Second best is to get a ballot early, fill it out carefully, and mail it early. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Racism, go to viewpoints.info/racism. That's viewpoints.info/racism. Point of View Truth Team on changing truth in uncertain times.
It's such an honor to be on Point of View. It's from the time I was a brand new bride 32 years ago. I've listened to the Point of View radio show. It's a trusted news source, but what it gives more than anything is the real news that all of us need, and that's the gospel of Jesus Christ. You are faithful to treasure the gospel and faithfully hand it to the next generation. That's something that Point of View does.
Again, unchanging truth in uncertain times. Brad Fisk with me in studio, and it certainly has been uncertain times, but we thought we might spend a little bit of time talking about the Abraham Accords, and we talked about this the other day because we were pointing out that our good friend Gary Bauer was there when that historic signing was taking place. If you're not familiar with him, and I'm sure all of our listeners are, served as Undersecretary of Education and later Chief Domestic Policy Advisor for Ronald Reagan, of course, head of American Values, and also the chairman of Campaign for Working Families. And we always enjoy interviewing him. And in very short order, we're going to interview his daughter, who has a new book out. So, Gary, thank you for joining us today.
Well, you're welcome, Kerby. Great to be with you. And I always get a little weary just hearing you describe the things I'm doing. I need to start cutting back on some of that. But it's always great to be with you guys. And Point of View just is it's an oasis in what is often a desert when it comes to public policy and staying informed. So I'm always honored to be a part of your program.
Let me also mention that Gary's in the midst of raising funds as well, and I encourage you to make your best gift also to American values as you support us. But let me, Gary, for just a minute, quote from the Wall Street Journal, because they ask a question. How would official Washington respond if a Democratic president brokered a peace deal between Israel and 2 Arab states? The papers would be stacked with play-by-plays of how the historic breakthrough was achieved and adulatory profiles of the people in the room. The hosannas to the president's strategic vision would flow from think tanks and academia, also from Oslo City Hall. You know, he might even actually win the Nobel Peace Prize. That's not exactly the way the mainstream press covered what you actually attended on Tuesday. Tell us more.
Well, it was not surprising, but nonetheless irritating, disappointing, and outrageous. How about that? You would have thought that the whole thing was a charade. I mean, most of the major networks gave it no coverage. I happened to catch, I think it was MSNBC at one point. I couldn't hear the sound, but they had a picture of the lawn of the White House, or a video up of the crowd that was gathered there, and the headline at the bottom was, "Large crowd gathers at White House without social distancing." So,
CNN did the same thing, I know.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes.
But, you know, it's when you think about what the president did when he took office, 2 really bold things that he was roundly condemned for. He moved our embassy in Israel to the capital of Israel, Jerusalem, and he got us out of the ill-conceived and, I believe, terrible nuclear deal with Iran. And in both cases, not only did the liberal media, but significant portions of our government, the State Department bureaucrats at the Department of Defense, said to the president if he did those 2 things, he would likely get us into a war in the Middle East, and it would set back peace efforts for years. Instead, doing those 2 things sent powerful messages that Israel is not going anywhere. It's the Jewish people are where they've been for 2,000 years, number one. And number 2, the real problem in the Middle East, the real threat to the Middle East is Iran. And I think when a lot of these Arab Muslim countries saw those 2 messages, it brought them to the point where they were willing to start making peace agreements with Israel. And I think we'll see a lot. I believe the White House is right when they say many more countries in the Middle East will join this effort in the next couple of months.
Let's, if we can, talk about the so-called foreign policy experts, because, you know, they said moving the embassy, there would be riots in the street. Taking out Qasem Soleimani, that would be, again, riots. As a matter of fact, acknowledging the Golan Heights. I've been thinking about doing a commentary, see if you agree with this, called Foreign Policy and George Costanza. George Costanza, for our listeners, was on Seinfeld, and he always made the wrong decision. And then one day he occurred to him that since I always make the wrong decision, maybe I should reverse doing what I'm inclined to do, and then he became successful. The foreign policy experts, Gary Bauer, it's not like they're wrong occasionally. They seem to be as wrong as George Costanza and Seinfeld. What are your thoughts?
Well, I wish I would have thought of that analogy. That is a great analogy to make. We're probably insulting George to compare some of the people in the foreign policy establishment. And we know there are brave men and women in uniform. They go off and fight the wars that we get into, and they do it courageously, and they always acquit themselves well. But we have gotten into wars that were ill-conceived, and we often, since the end of World War II, have gotten into wars that we didn't intend to win. And we fight these wars often by the rules of the American Civil Liberties Union or the editorial board at the New York Times. And that isn't the way to win a war. You guys, I'm sure, remember that when President Trump took office, the left was saying he was going to get us in a war. I mean, they said that about a number of his foreign policy moves. And now they're criticizing him because he hasn't gotten us in a war. and that he doesn't, immediately get involved with another deployment of troops, and is doing his best to bring troops home from places like Afghanistan, where they've been now for 20 years. So I think it's a tremendous tribute to the president that he was able to withstand that pressure. We expected, the White House expected the pressure from the State Department.
Oh, sure.
They have their own foreign policy. But you can imagine what it felt like if you're the president, and he's a big supporter of the American military, and you had some of these generals coming over and saying, Mr. President, don't move the embassy. Don't get out of that nuclear deal. We're not ready for another war in the Middle East. And he listened politely. He thanked them. But I think he instinctively knew that this old approach was not working. And events are proving him correct in that regard.
And again, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, because I certainly do like the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. Matter of fact, he's going to be speaking in my church this Sunday, so that will be an opportunity. But, Brad, we need, just before I go to a break, to remind people that we're in the midst of Truth Team 2020. What about that?
Indeed. We do this twice a year, and we call it Truth Team. And we invite you, our listeners, an opportunity to link arms with us, especially looking at the near future coming at us like a freight train. It's called an election, a presidential election that is fraught with problems. And you joining with us financially is so critical right now. So we're asking you to give at least $1 a day. That's $30 a month to join the Truth Team. And any amount will be fine above or below that. But please, join us, won't you? 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. You can also give at the website at pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net.
And Gary, one of the things I thought I would come to you just for a second is to recognize that this is really an important election, and that's one of the reasons why we've been encouraging people to support you and to support us, because as basically Brad has been saying, we kind of have to have a war chest here, because I don't know about you, but it seems like these hit pieces are coming fast and furious against the president and against conservative voters and all sorts of other things. What are your thoughts?
There's no question about it. I mean, obviously, the next whatever it is now, 48 days are going to be they're going to be exciting. They're also going to be, in many ways, troubling, I think, given what we're seeing the left's willing to do. And depending on what happens on Election Day, we could have a tumultuous couple of weeks or couple of months following Election Day. And it is going to be imperative in all of the confusion and turmoil that may take place that people have a reliable place to go. And that is what Point of View has been for, I think, countless people. I know it's even for me, it's been a way to check with people I respect and who I know have the same worldview, to make sure that my instincts on some of the headlines are correct. And Kerby, I just think you guys do a great job, and I'm going to be supporting you this year. I haven't always been as faithful in that as I should have been, and I hope that my supporters will do so too. It's a great way to be in this battle.
Again, the number is 800-347-5151. This is a perfect time to call during the break, 800-347-5151. Pointofview.net. We'll be back with Gary Bauer right after this.
Everything you do should reflect who you are. The way you spend your time, your posts on social media, the investments you make for your retirement and for the future of our nation. Point of View Radio keeps you and countless people informed in a time when you almost need a personal research assistant to see if what you heard on the news is really true. Our team is here to help, but we need your help right now as this week heads to an end. We need monthly team members, what we call our Truth Team, as we head into the last part of 2020. It's been a unique year, to say the least, and unfortunately, it's likely to get even crazier. Make sure that you and others have the information you need to reflect who you are and to bring blessing to our land. And remember, as Kerby said, today your gift will be matched, doubled. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800 800-347-5151. Unchanging truth in uncertain times. Point of View Radio. pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, continue our conversation for a few more minutes with our good friend Gary Bauer at American Values. And Brad, if nothing else, he brought up something that we thought about talking about, because my commentary today is about discarded ballots. And one of the booklets we've made available for people that give at the $50 a month level is the one on voter fraud. But whether you look at voter fraud or just other problems with mail-in ballots, and I recognize that we do have some states that have mail-in ballots, but they've been using those for years. That's Colorado, where you live, or Hawaii, Oregon, Washington, Utah. Most do not. So changing the rules midstream doesn't work very well. But even apart from voter fraud for just a minute, as I point out in this commentary, the survey done by National Public Radio found that during the primary season alone, 558,000 absentee votes were tossed out because, for all sorts of reasons, the signatures didn't match, they didn't have the right postage, all sorts of other things.
They voted wrong.
And basically, if indeed the discard rate continues during this general election, you're going to be throwing out probably millions of ballots.
Chaos.
And Gary Bauer, I'll come to you, because then you know what will happen. Those three of us around the table remember one time when an election went into overtime in 2000. You remember it only so well because, of course, later you ended up, of course, on the staff with Ronald Reagan, and then seeing the staff later on that you knew that were going to work with George W. Bush. And you can hear everybody saying, count every vote, even if some of those ballots are questionable. So unless we have a blowout election like Ronald Reagan had in 1984,
yes,
I just think we have some real challenges ahead. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think your summary is exactly right, Kerby. We had the hanging Chad fiasco in Florida with all these adults peering at paper ballots and trying to figure out whether somebody intended to vote one way or another. Well, imagine that kind of controversy going on in the weeks after the upcoming election, not in one state, but perhaps in 5 or 6 states, and then 4, 5, 6, 7 urban areas in other states. You could have a real mess, and I think it's significant that the Biden campaign has literally put together a legal army of, I'm told, over 600 attorneys who will be a litigation team to take these disputed votes into the courts. So we could have a real mess on our hands. And, of course, in the world that we live in, facing communist China on one end of the globe and then enemies like the mullahs of Iran and the Russian Federation and so forth, they are certainly going to exploit the divisions all of this will cause. So I think a lot of people on the left and in the media are being very irresponsible, and they seem to be setting the stage, as the president has indicated, for shenanigans to be pulled in order to change what the actual outcome of the election was on Election Day.
Well, and again, a lot of these are really close because you look at the number of ballots that were discarded in Wisconsin, 23,000. Well, Donald Trump only won Wisconsin by 22,000 votes. So you can begin to see what happens in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and a variety of other states, Florida. And then you have the laws being changed. In Georgia, it always has been the case, and we have a lot of listeners in Georgia, that absentee ballots that arrived after the election day were to be set aside and eventually destroyed. Well, that legal team was able to convince one of those federal judges that now they have to count the ballots as long as they were postmarked by Election Day, even if they arrived days later. So people are changing the rules in the midst of this. And not that many of us watch football anymore, but you can imagine a football game where all of a sudden they change the rules in the midst of a football game. And that's kind of what's happening right now. And this, I think, is real concerning. And so, Brad, maybe what we should do is get every listener to Point of View that's a Christian and all of their friends that are Christians, make sure they're not only registered to vote, but vote, so there'd be such an overwhelming push of Christian voters that we change the election.
That actually is a very viable solution, which I happen to agree wholeheartedly with, and that is just bury them on Election Day, and then there's no room for the shenanigans if there's a 30-point spread or whatever. But, it's going to be really important to stay tuned into what's going on, and it's going to get confusing for a lot of people. That's one of the reasons we're here. That's why we call ourselves the Truth Team during this so important fundraising week that we're in the middle of. Remember, we're a little bit behind in where we're supposed to be, so we're asking you to maybe give extra for the war chest that we're going to need to create to get the job done. 800-347-5151. There has never been a better time to support Point of View in our almost 50 years of broadcasting. The Truth. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151, and you can give on the web at pointofview.net.
Gary, one of the reasons why I always like to mention the fact that you also head up the Campaign for Working Families is everybody right now, and this is a national show, focuses a lot of time and attention on the presidential race. And I might just mention on this flash dive, we have a video where I go much deeper and talk about, for example, we have 25 U.S. Senate races, 33 plus 2 special elections, 435 races for the House of Representatives, and then you have 13 governor's races. 43 out of the 50 states have state legislative races, and a lot of people don't go all the way down the ballot and don't think about that, but you've identified some of these key candidates. And the example I love to use is I bet most people couldn't have told you who their county judge is. And then we had the pandemic and the lockdowns, and these county judges were closing down businesses. And I bet a lot of our listeners now know who their county judge is. They know who their governor is because some of those lockdown orders came from people that they never really paid attention to before.
It's been a real civics lesson. Some of these officials don't sound like they matter very much, and we're all busy. We have family challenges and financial issues and all sorts of things that we obviously need to spend time on. And so you're right, Kerby, that people say, well, look, it's one thing to get involved and pick somebody running for president, but what difference do all these other lower level positions mean? And it ends up that those lower local and state officials can affect everything from our religious liberty rights, as we've seen churches ordered to close and pastors being threatened with jail time if they defy the orders. We've seen a lot of things happen over the last 6 to 8 months that I think have been shocking to a lot of Americans. And I know, Kerby, that a lot of the listening audience you have are in areas around the country that correspond to where a lot of my support is. And so, again, I want to repeat to those of you who are listening today and are supporters of mine, I really am personally asking you to step up to the plate for Point of View and make if it's a one-time gift, I'm sure you guys won't turn that away, but this idea of committing to a regular gift of a certain amount over a period of weeks or months, which gives any ministry or any entity the security and the predictability you need when you're trying to run your organization. I mean, that would be a real godsend for Point of View and for Kerby and for all that team that does such a great job in educating their listeners about how to be an active citizen in the difficult times that we're living in.
Let me also mention we have a link to ouramericanvalues.org. You should subscribe to the End of Day Report, and you should also support that ministry as well. And so, Gary, I appreciate you being our eyes and ears out there. And I got a feeling we might as well just set it up right now that the day after the election, we're going to get you back on because we're going to be talking about an election which I fear will be in overtime, and we'll end up try to follow all the things that happen there as well. So thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
You're welcome. I'm going to put you on hold, Kerby, and just leave the line open for the next 48 days in case I need to get to you right away.
That's very good. Brad, just before we take a break, this would be a great time for people that have said, golly, we so appreciate Gary Bauer. And over the years, you have known him when you were working at Focus on the Family, and just the ability that he has to, in a very succinct way, help us understand what is going on in our world. And since he's there in Washington, D.C., we depend on him so often, and certainly a great friend of this ministry. So let me encourage people right now that if they have not best ever given, this would be one very good reason to do so, that you can really find out what's happening behind the scenes. 800-347-5151. Of course, the website is pointofview.net. And I did remember this, mention this flash drive. One of the videos there is where I take you through kind of an election summary.
Yeah, I listened to that, and you can't get this piece that Kerby did anywhere else but on this thumb drive. It's not recorded anywhere. It's not on any websites. So it's on the thumb drive, and it is an incredible overview summary of where we're at today in this whole political craziness. And so I'd highly encourage you to get in at $1 a day or more, and that will be yours as a thank you gift. 800-347-5151.
Let's take a break. We'll come back with a lot more. 800-347-5151.
Point of View Truth Team on changing truth in uncertain times.
Hello, I'm O.S. Hawkins, and what a privilege it is to say these few brief words about how much I love Kerby Anderson and how much I respect the ministry of Point of View. You know, in a world we're living in, when their culture is collapsing and crumbling all around us, we see some folks rushing out to condemn the culture. They just maybe beat their Bibles a little harder and yell a little louder, while others compromise the culture and some even condone it. But what I love about Point of View is it confronts our culture every day as Kerby speaks the truth and speaks it in love. So I want to encourage you to support Point of View.
I would encourage you to follow the advice of O.S. Hawkins, been in the program with us many times before. We've been talking with our friend Gary Bauer. This is a good time for you to give us a call. And next hour, we're going to be talking with Phil Robertson. By the way, he's got a new book out, and we will chat about it briefly. We won't go through it in entirety, but Jesus Politics, How to Win Back the Soul of America. And so we'll talk about that. Let me just mention that earlier this hour, I mentioned the 2 articles about the riots and how that's affecting voting. The third article, I just thought I'd mention real quickly. It's entitled Vote for Harris, Biden, or Else, and it's by Beckett Adams, in which he first of all quotes somebody that we quoted yesterday, and it's also in the piece that I sent out as an email to many of you that received that, and that comes from what was in The Atlantic. If Biden loses, he says, mass unrest is more unlikely, and because the left will have more difficulty accepting the results. And so it's almost like extortion. But this piece that I've added also adds a piece from the Washington Post, which comes from Rosa Brooks on the Transition Integrity Project, where they have this white paper, again, coming up with this scenario and almost scaremongering, saying, if we don't elect Joe Biden, and if for some reason you deplorables out there re-elect Donald Trump, there's going to be rioting in the streets, what I think is a kind of a veiled statement. But they are saying, interestingly enough, that unless the election's a blowout like 1984 or 1964, there's probably going to be a time in which that's going to be in doubt. So this article adds to some of the material that we talked about yesterday, adds to some of the material that I sent in my email to you. So I wanted you to know that is available to you as well. And as we've said before, when you support Point of View, of course, you're supporting the radio program and all the things we say on radio, but you're also supporting the videos. We have, again, a link to iVoter Guide. Now they have the material out about the presidential election, and they'll be working their way down to the senatorial elections and the rest. My Viewpoints commentary today on Viewpoints on discarded ballots, and of course all these articles we posted. So Brad, for a lot of reasons, you're helping educate yourself, educating other individuals, empowering them to make a difference in the culture.
I'll say this, would you even know that the other side is planning what's called extortion? Because that's really what they're threatening to do with the elections and with the violence and everything else. We are here for you, and there couldn't be a more critical time. It really is important that we make our goals. We are really lagging a little behind for this week, and we need to hear from you, especially like you were asking for new people to join.
Yes.
800-347-5151. Join the Truth Team, $1 a day or more, and you can be a part of this team that is so critically important in the next several weeks. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151, or you can give to pointofview.net, pointofview.net.
Point of View Truth Team.
Going through the stations and caught Kerby and a very interesting topic. So just listening to it, and so just by hearing the topic, I can relate to some of those topics, but it has impacted my life a lot. I enjoy listening to the station.
It has been about 25 years since God providentially led me to Point of View when I did not even know it existed. During this time, I have shared numerous taped programs with my family and incorporated the Outlook magazine and other articles into the homeschool curriculum I used in teaching our 5 children. Back 25 years ago, I had to put a big box radio with a recorder strategically in a corner so that I could hear that message. Point of View receives no government funding, for which I am grateful. It is therefore my honor, privilege, and responsibility to support this organization of tremendous self-sacrificing people on a monthly financial basis, and to put courage into them through letters and specific prayers, as they have become like family to me.
Point of View Truth Team.
Again, she's talking about monthly giving, and of course, if you can just give a one-time gift, that is wonderful. We just love to hear from you. If you don't have the ability to give, we just want to pray for you. But most importantly, the ministry does very well with monthly gifts, because if nothing else, the bills come in monthly, and so we can match monthly gifts with monthly bills. We can actually make the ministry work effectively.
I really sense there's 5 people right now who could give $1,000 right now. they could pick up the phone at 800-347-5151 and give $1,000 gift. Won't you please help us at any level you can, maybe even more than 1,000. Maybe I'm thinking too small, but that's the impression I have, is that could happen.
That is certainly the case. By the way, we are going to take a phone call or two maybe in the next hour because we have some people that wanted to add some comments about this as well. But first of all, I wanted you just to be aware of the fact that we have lots of news and information for you today. Phil Robertson will be with us in just a moment. But one of the other things I thought I'd add real quickly, some people say, what's happening to these people that go and riot? You know, I mentioned that yesterday.
You did.
And interestingly enough, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, they had a riot that broke out on Sunday because this one individual was attacking officers with a knife because he was a person of color, Hispanic. What was so interesting is even though you could see the body cam footage, there was a riot, but this was a little different than what you found in Portland because then they had to appear before the magisterial district judge, Bruce Roth. And he decided that he would throw the book at that mob, and on Monday set bail for 9 of those arrested on suspicion of rioting at $1 million per person.
Oh, wow.
And for the other rioter, his bail was set at $100,000. And so none of the 10 defendants could get out of jail. They had, again, a demonstration Monday night. It was all very peaceful. You know, it's called deterrence.
Yes.
And so I just like to cover this from time to time because some of you just say to me off air, what's happening to these people that are rioting? Oh, there's things happening. And we cover that on Point of View, but you wouldn't know it if you just listen to the mainstream media.
That's right. And again, we're asking you to help us continue to be your voice. We're out there saying things and finding out things that I'll never hear unless I hear it through Point of View. So won't you join the Truth Team at 800-347-5151. It's a 2 to 3 minute phone call, and you don't have to have the money in hand. You can just give when you can, but make the pledge. Won't you today? 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. 5151. They can also give online.
And that is at pointofview.net. As you go there, you'll find some of the viewpoints, commentaries, a few of the articles I've just mentioned that we have available for you. And, of course, you can also get a little bit more information about some of our guests. Gary Bauer, just a few minutes, Phil Robertson. If you say, wait a minute, I want to contact them, or I want to ask them a question, or I want to get some of the material they've mentioned, that's all available at Point of View. And you're supporting not only the radio program, but all the things on the website as well. We do need to hear from you. And, of course, you know we're going to have Phil Robertson. Oh, my gosh, that's going to be crazy. I have no idea what he's going to say, and we'll be having fun with his book, Jesus Politics, How to Win Back the Soul of America.
8 people at $1 a day, 5 people at $1,000 single gift. Give us a call, won't you?
And again, that number, 800-347-5151. I'm looking at 1 or 2 people just looking at their phones, their cell phones. They're not looking and answering the phone. So
okay,
it is time to let them have an opportunity to talk with you. A couple of them are family members, and they'd love to talk with you. So again, it's at 800-347-5151 or pointofview.net. Please give us a call. Truth Team 2020. We'll be back with more right after this.
Everything you do should reflect who you are. The way you spend your time, your posts on social media, the investments you make for your retirement, and for the future of our nation. Point of View Radio keeps you and countless people informed in a time when you almost need a personal research assistant to see if what you heard on the news is really true. Our team is here to help, but we need your help right now as this week heads to an end. We need monthly team members, what we call our Truth Team, as we head into the last part of 2020. It's been a unique year, to say the least, and unfortunately, it's likely to get even crazier. Make sure that you and others have the information you need to reflect who you are and to bring blessing to our land. And remember, as Kerby said, today your gift will be matched, doubled. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. Unchanging truth in uncertain times. Point of View Radio, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
This hour, we're going to spend some time in just a few minutes talking with Phil Robertson. If you'd like to join us on air line, 800-351-1212. We'll take a phone call in just a minute. But Brad Fisk with me, and I was just looking at a few states we haven't even heard from.
Yeah, I'm looking at the same thing.
Many of them are swing states. Michigan, Wisconsin. Some people think Minnesota's a swing state. Nebraska, New Mexico, Utah. So anyway, those are 6 states. So if you're in one of those states, we need to have at least one of you give us a phone call.
Please do.
And of course, we're very fortunate from those in all the other states that have responded. But I just thought, as we get near the end of the week and we still haven't heard from some people in some of the states, we'd love to hear from them. Let's take a phone call real quickly. Houston in Alabama, I think it is. Thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you, Kerby, and thank you for doing the Lord's work. We really appreciate you.
Well, thank you. What's your comment real quickly?
My comment is why these politicians don't worry about getting these people jobs. I guess their egos are ahead of their IQ. Back during the Great Depression, we had 2 organizations, the WPA and the CCC. They put hundreds of thousands of Americans to work immediately, working on roads, national parks. They talk about all that brush in California. They could get rid of it. They could go into the regions where hurricanes have done damage and help clean it up. And they could pay them $12 to $15 an hour, and they would be getting that $600 and having to work, because most Americans want a helping hand. They don't want a handout.
That's right. And WPA, of course, is the Works Project Administration. And, of course, that was developed back in the late 1930s. And the sad reality is, Houston, that I'm thinking of some of these younger people, they don't want to go work. But as a believer, I believe that work is something that is encouraging. It is part of our, if you will, mandate we see back in Genesis. And so that's another solution, because, as I said, there are some people that just want a handout, but most people want a hand up, and they want to just be able to make a difference. So if you believe in that and believe some of the things we're talking about here today, we certainly do encourage you to give our individuals waiting by the phone. I keep looking over and see some people waiting by the phone, and it's time for them to actually chat with you for just a minute. And you can make that phone call. It's 800-347-5151. Won't take very long. And if you've been waiting till the end, well, we're coming to the last hour on our Thursday. And you want to do this before we get Phil Robertson on, Duck Dynasty. I know he's going to be saying all sorts of things. And we know what happens when we get really good guests on the program, as we did with Gary Bauer. Everybody listens, but nobody calls. So call right now.
That's right. And just so you know, to backfill a little bit here, this is Truth Team Week. Twice a year, for a week, we come to you and say, help us with our budget. Pay attention to this. Is really important. We are listener supported. I'll say it again. We are listener supported. That means you, the listener, support the ministry as God leads. And we're just simply asking you to pray and obey, see what God would have you do. We've got some thank you gifts at $1 a day or more, $30 a month or more, $360 for the year or more. And we're excited to be able to give you a flash drive that has over 140 items on it, information in various formats, written, audio, et cetera, et cetera. It's an incredible resource, plus a really good interview that you did on what the current state of the elections are. So 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, or on the website you can give, pointofview.net.
Point of View Truth Team.
And I've been listening to Point of View for about 12 years now. It's just been such an impact on me because in high school, when I first became aware of the political spectrum and all that, and then the culture wars going on, I was a conservative ideologue, basically, going with whatever conservatives said. But after listening to the show over the years, I've realized that I'm supposed to be for truth. I'm supposed to be a Christian and then a conservative. And I'm supposed to look at all this that's going on around us in today's culture through a biblical lens. And I can't thank y'all enough for that.
I'm so glad to have the Kingdom Keys Network that presents Point of View program and replays it by recording at night so I can catch up on what I miss. It is the highlight of my day. I don't have Wi-Fi or cable news access, so radio is almost my sole means of reception of news. And Point of View helps me understand the political landscape and apply Christian values to it. I'm so honored to be able to give to Point of View. It is a most worthy Christian outreach. We need their informed voice to speak to the issues we face each day.
Without programs like Point of View, Ministries and Works would not have a forum that reaches the populations that need to hear the truth about the very important issues that America is founded on. So often we take what we hear for granted, the radio program or the wonderful personalities. But they can only be on if people like you and me support them.
Point of View Truth Team.
And again, Phil Robertson will be with us in just a moment, so that's a good time to call right now. And we'd certainly need to hear from some of you. And as I've looked down this list of listeners from various states that have called in, I also recognize, as I mentioned just a minute ago, a couple of you in about half a dozen states have not called, so we certainly need to hear from you. But whether you have been supporting this ministry for some time or whether you're maybe just a new listener and have the potential of being a new donor, we certainly do encourage your financial support. And we recognize some of you have been through some difficult times and you cannot support this ministry. Well, just pray for us and let us pray for you as well. But we're hoping, Brad, that there are others that can step forward right now and make that phone call because we desperately need to hear from some of our listeners.
The gifts are coming in, and I want to read this one. This is good. They became a Truth Team member today. Thank you for that. Here's the comment. I stopped listening to mainstream media. I appreciate the biblical truth, and I'm praying for the election.
Yes.
I love that. That just summarizes up. Point of View, that's our essence, is telling you things you'll hear here now that you won't hear anywhere else.
And Phil will be talking about the election in just a minute. My wife was talking to somebody who said, well, I'm looking forward to getting this flash drive and I'll share it with people in my church. And you're free to do that. And you can dump things off and learn all sorts of things. Matter of fact, some people say I want to get more than one because I might pass it on to my kids and click it to their backpack because it has a little clip there, a little carabiner. So again, those are just some things we're doing to say thank you for your support. Whatever you can do, maybe it's a one-time gift. I hope many of you could join us at $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 a year or more. And some of you might say, well, I could probably do a little bit more. And that's why we, again, hold up these booklets, because every month I send out a booklet to those of you that have given $50 or more a month. And of course, you don't have to give it monthly. You can give a one-time gift of $1,000. You get it as well. So whatever you want to do, we want to put it in your hands. And these are resources that we've been making available to you as a thank you gift. So you'll receive that. You'll receive the flash drive and, of course, the Outlook magazine. And I know you don't give to get, but those are things we want to put in the mail to you right away. And all you need to do in order to find out about those is to go to the website, pointofview.net, or as Brad has mentioned, just give that call, 800-347-5151. And when we come back, we're going to talk with our friend Phil Robertson. He's been on the program with us before. We've talked about happy, and unfiltered, but this one, Jesus Politics, How to Win Back the Soul of America. He's got some 9 chapters on really what to do in terms of the voting booth, and then 3 chapters on what to do in terms of Jesus Politics, everyday life. So we'll be talking about that with him, but you can give us a call right now, 800-347-5151.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Less than 2 months before a national election, lawsuits are being filed to change election laws. In Georgia, the law used to require that absentee ballots that arrived after Election Day were to be set aside and eventually destroyed. A federal judge now has ordered Georgia officials to count all ballots postmarked by Election Day, even if they arrive days later. A similar injunction has been filed in Pennsylvania. A lawsuit in Ohio is challenging the need for verifying a signature. Minnesota waived a rule that absentee ballots must be signed by a witness. Lawyers for the Trump campaign have challenged that decision. All of this legal activity is due to the fact that we may see a major amount of absentee ballot rejections. The Associated Press estimates that if states reject these ballots at the same rate as the 2020 primaries, up to 3 times as many voters in the battleground states could have their votes discarded. A survey by NPR discovered that 558,000 absentee votes were tossed out during the 2020 primaries. For example, Wisconsin had 23,000 ballots discarded. In 2016, Donald Trump won Wisconsin by 22,000 votes. It is easy to see where this will lead if we have a close election. The loser will challenge the fact that thousands of ballots were rejected and call for the state to count every vote. The debate will surely end up in the courts, which is why the editors of the Wall Street Journal ask, will courts pick the next president? If you want your vote to count in this election, the best solution is to vote in person. Second best is to get a ballot early, fill it out carefully, and mail it early. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Racism, go to viewpoints.info/racism. That's viewpoints.info/racism. Point of View Truth Team on changing truth in uncertain times.
Hi, this is Michael Ferris. I am the President, CEO, and General Counsel of Alliance Defending Freedom, and I've been friends with Point of View Radio for decades. This is such a great radio ministry. I'm personally a partner with Point of View, and I would encourage each of you to be a partner. Point of View gets information in a timely fashion to people who need to know the truth, and Point of View brings you the truth. It brings you a Christian perspective on the news, and it calls you to prayer and action in a timely manner. I'll never forget the day that freedom was preserved in the homeschool arena because of the work of Point of View Radio, leading the charge on that. And so always been grateful for that and would encourage you to be a part of the Point of View team. God bless you.
Michael Ferris with Alliance Defending Freedom, before that Homeschool Legal Defense Association, and a partner, so he's not asking you to do something he isn't doing. And Brad Fisk in studio with us. We're going to be talking in just a minute with Phil Robertson, but again, it is Truth Team 2020, and we do need to hear from a few more listeners, don't we?
We do indeed. In fact, you know what? I'd like to just stop for a moment and have you consider the capacity of giving of $1,000. Would you have that capacity? Would you be able to step up for $1,000 gift to help us reach the goal we need to get at by tonight when we're done? 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. And, of course, a gift of any amount would be very welcomed. Thank you.
Let's bring to the microphone Phil Robertson, a founder and, of course, co-owner of the Duck Commander Company. You might be seeing right now his television series In the Woods with Phil. Of course, we've talked with him in the past about his book Happy, Happy, Happy and Unfiltered. This one really, Brad, calls for a radical call for Christians to use their freedoms in what is called Jesus politics, how to win back the soul of America. Phil Robertson, always great to have you on the program with us.
Good to be with you guys today.
Let's, if we can, the book is really divided into two sections: the voting booth, Jesus Politics in the Voting Booth, Jesus Politics in Everyday Life. First of all, I would think you would agree with all the people we've had on this week that this is perhaps the most important election. It is a, if you will, fork in the road. Matter of fact, I think we've gone down the wrong road a little too fast, and we need to back up and find the right fork. But that really is the theme in your book, is that you're really challenging Christians to use their freedoms to vote for biblical policies. Tell us more, if you might.
Well, you know, you hear this verse thrown around for years and years and years, but they never finish it. For God so loved the world, he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but have eternal life. Now listen to this. In lieu of the state of our nation, God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe stands condemned already, because he's not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. Now check this out. He renders the verdict, and he hasn't died on a cross for the sins of the world yet. He hasn't been buried and raised from the dead yet, but he's on the earth, and he's showing the human race how to live, and then is telling them, look, I'm going to die. They're going to bury me. In 3 days I'll be raised from the dead. He told his disciples that throughout his ministry. Of course, they would all look around at each other and like, what? So they just didn't quite get it. So in this John 3, instead of John 3:16, I just read that, verse 19 says, and Jesus is saying this. Jesus said, this is the verdict. Light has come into the world. That was 2,020 years ago, is when the light showed up. And to this day, he is the marker of all time. All the years before Jesus got here are called all the years before Jesus got here. And all the years after he arrived and died, was buried, and raised from the dead, and went back to the Father, all those years are called Year of the Lord. Well, out of all the individuals who ever lived on planet Earth, we're counting time by just one of them, Jesus, the Son of God. This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but men loved darkness instead of light, because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and will not come into the light, for fear his deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light, so that it may be seen plainly that what God has done has been done through God. So when you look at that text, you say, let's see here. We have two sides, and they've rallied together. The soldiers of Satan on one side, and the sons and daughters of God on the other, and we're clashing. And what my mind, look, I've been trying to write these books to try to get people to, let's see, exhibit love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. I'm trying to get people to live like that, and what we get instead is, like the Apostle Paul told the Romans, since they did not think it worthwhile. Think about this. I'm going to quote a verse, and the one I just quoted in John. I'll quote a verse. These are 2,000-year-old writings. In Romans chapter 1, listen, 28, since they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, he gave them over to a depraved mind to do what ought not to be done. And he has a list. They've been filled with wickedness, evil, greed, depravity. They're full of envy, murder. They're slaughtering their own children while they're still in the womb. They are full of murder, strife, deceit, malice. They're gossips, slanderers, God haters, insolent, arrogant, boastful. They invent ways of doing evil, which reminds me of what we see on television every night.
Yes.
They invent ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They're senseless. Now, just think about a human being in this shape. Senseless, faithless, heartless, and ruthless. That's a description that the Apostle Paul wrote in the days of the Roman Empire. And the question, I guess, is, has anything changed?
Not hardly. Let's take a break, and just before we do so, Brad, first of all, I want to just say to our listeners out here, are you ready for some plain speaking and some plain talking and talking about what the Bible has to say and what it means to live as a person who is part of the kingdom and follow the King? And that's another aspect of something we talk about so often here on Point of View.
It is indeed, and it's an opportunity for us to bring the biblical worldview to our culture every single day. And we've been doing it for just shy of 50 years. So we've been around for a while, but from day one, we have stayed true to the principles that God has called us to. And we want to continue to do that. There could maybe never be a more critical time on the face of this earth in history and human history that's coming up right now for our nation in just a few weeks. Will you stand with us and join our truth team? $1 a day or more, maybe $1,000, maybe $500, the amounts between you and God, but give us a call. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. And you can also give at pointofview.net on the web, pointofview.net.
You know, one of the things we try to put in your hands are books and resources. One of those, of course, the one we're talking about today, Jesus Politics, How to Win Back the Soul of America. It just came out last month, so you probably can find it in your local bookstore, but we have a way for you to get it both in hardcover and Kindle. Talks about the Kingdom Manifesto, the Kingdom Foundation, even gun ownership and the Kingdom of Love, which relates very much to my fourth article today on the former Vice President Joe Biden's gun control claims, and we critique that, as well as the family, health care, and the rest. And then, of course, Law and Order of the King, Changing America Through Kingdom Living. And so we'll come back and continue our conversation with Phil Robertson, but this would be a perfect time to call because you don't want to miss what he has to say. That number is 800-347-5151. You said you were looking for a few people that maybe could give $1,000.
We are looking for 5 of you. We're going to look at our tally and see what's happening over there, but thank you for calling with your very best gift, whatever that is. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151.
Or also at the website, pointofview.net. We'll continue our conversation with Phil Robertson about Jesus Politics right after this.
Everything you do should reflect who you are. The way you spend your time, your posts on social media, the investments you make for your retirement, and for the future of our nation. Point of View Radio keeps you and countless people informed in a time when you almost need a personal research assistant to see if what you heard on the news is really true. Our team is here to help, but we need your help right now as this week heads to an end. We need monthly team members, what we call our Truth Team, as we head into the last part of 2020. It's been a unique year, to say the least, and unfortunately, it's likely to get even crazier. Make sure that you and others have the information you need to reflect who you are and to bring blessing to our land. And remember, as Kerby said, today your gift will be matched, doubled. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. Unchanging truth in uncertain times. Point of View Radio, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You're listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Truth Team 2020, Unchanging Truth in Uncertain Times. We've been talking with Phil Robertson, and he'll be with us for a little bit longer as we talk about Jesus politics, how to win back the soul of America. And, of course, Brad Fisk with me as well. And, Phil, all through your book, you're talking about this idea of kingdom living, a kingdom manifesto, a kingdom foundation. And so can you speak to that issue? What does it mean to be a kingdom man or woman, and how does that relate to this very important election in front of us?
It's a spiritual kingdom that the King established, Jesus. Remember, John the Baptist, when you say, what was he hollering at the top of his lungs? He just walked up out of the wilderness looking about like I do right now, long whiskers. I mean, this is a rough-looking dude. And he's paving the way for the King of the kingdom. You're like, and we're talking the heavenly kingdom. He's brought it down to the earth because John the Baptist said over and over and over, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand, is near. From that time on, Jesus said, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. He sent the disciples out, and he told them, you preach this message, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Well, it came in Acts chapter 2 when the Holy Spirit came on those people, and the first 3,000 were baptized because when Peter preached the gospel to them, you with the help of men wicked men, you put Jesus on a cross, nailed him to a cross, but God raised him from the dead, and they were all those Jews that had said, crucify him, crucify him. They're sitting there listening to that thinking, what in the world have we done? Well, he goes down further, and he finally ends it up and said, this Jesus you crucified is both Lord and Christ. And then they said, what shall we do? He said, repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus, so that your sins will be forgiven and you'll receive God's Spirit. Well, just below that, he warned them. He pleaded with them, save yourselves from this corrupt generation. Those who accepted his message, they were baptized in about 3,000. There's your first 3,000 of the kingdom of God, and it's been going on from then to now. Listen to this. Now, we're 2,000 years since Jesus, 2020, since he arrived, guys. So you say, let's see now. This text I'm reading now, 2 Timothy chapter 3, this was written in about 50 A.D. Well, it's been right at 2,000 years ago. Listen to what the Apostle Paul told Timothy, 2 Timothy 3. Mark this, meaning take special note of this. There will be terrible times in the last days. I know we're 2,000 years closer to the last days than we were, guys. That's all I know for sure. People, listen to this. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful. Think about just the ungrateful in these United States where a guy like me could start out fishing the river. I had a little skill set that I knew what birds sounded like. I'd listen to them, and it's kind of like playing piano by ear. I had a knack for knowing what they sounded like. Well, I've built duck calls, these various devices that mimicked what these ducks were doing. I could sound just like them. So I built a mallard drake and a gadwall call and a teal call and a wood duck call, and we put them on the market. And listen, it made me a multi-millionaire. And you say, are you grateful that in these United States you can have an idea like that? Just think about it. The chance of turning on a lathe, boring the duck calls and making them, and you ended up a multi-millionaire? Only in these United States. If you trust in God, you trust in capitalism, that's capitalism at its best, and you work hard, you can be a multi-millionaire and do it fairly easily. Watch this. But here we are. People are ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control.
Quite a list.
Brutal. You say, all these things he's listening. I'm looking at them every day on television.
It's true.
Say, what in the world? So, the book that I just wrote and all the ones before it, all I'm trying to get, and by the way, they are coming down here to Louisiana, where I am, by the throngs. We have baptized them. They are,
it's just
they
amazing.
are coming up. I had a little girl step into the baptismal pool, and before I baptized her, she said, I said, all the females go in over here on the right, and I'll meet you up in the baptistry, and the males go to the left. And I said, don't try to slick me by being a female thinking you're a male. I said, hey, I know the difference. I said, I know the difference. So I know who you are, whether you're a male or a female. So anyway, she steps in the baptistry a couple of weeks ago, and she said, I want to say a few words, Mr. Robertson. And I had a mic, and all the brothers were listening, the sisters out in the audience were listening. And she said, I have been a left-wing, liberal, Antifa person. She said, until right now. She said, I read one of your books, Mr. Robertson. I didn't even know who Jesus was.
Wow, what a great story.
So I'm here to tell you that from now on, Jesus will be the Lord of my life.
Amen.
And I said, where are you from, girl? And she said, New York City. I said, well, good night. You look perfectly normal.
Phil, we have to go to a break, but I just thought, again, what a great story. It's an impact of your books and just an impact of the television show over these years. And it has always just been great to have you on the program with us.
Hey, thanks, guys. Jesus, number one. I hope your listeners were listening carefully.
Well, that's what we need them to do. And again, we've had him on before, and one of the reasons we've done that is because people love to hear him. And you talk about unscripted. That is always the case about Phil Robertson. Let me just mention real quickly to do him some justice. Again, the book is entitled Jesus Politics. Probably see it in the local bookstore because it came out last month. And if not, we have information about it there. And it is amazing that sometimes you will get individuals that say, what is this crazy guy down in Louisiana doing? And look at the impact of a woman that simply says, I want to talk about the fact that I was a member of Antifa from New York City, a left-wing leftist, and now I love Jesus. And that shows the power of the gospel, which is one more reason why we talk about that. And one of the reasons why in this flash drive, we have a whole section here on evangelism, because we haven't really talked about that much this week, but we have done some great programs on how to share your faith with those who are maybe atheists, how to share your faith with those who are Muslims and others. And so there's a whole section that we've added to this on education, on evangelism, on a variety of other topics. And it's one of the things we make available because we want to educate you and encourage you. And if nothing else, Phil Robertson encourages you today to go out there and live the Christian life.
Absolutely. And, that's what we're all about. We have history, we have legacy, and we're excited to do the Lord's work. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151.
One of the things I wanted to talk about with him, but we'll talk about it after the break, Netflix is really coming under some criticism, not just from the conservative world, although they make it sound like it's just narrow-minded conservatives that have a problem with cuties and some of this, but we've had some people say, we had the hashtag Me Too movement, which told us that we should be really concerned about how we treat women, and then we have this thing coming out. So I want to talk about that in just a minute. And, of course, Phil Robertson has had his comments comments about that, as well as Jim Dennison, who's been on the program with us, has, and Katrina Trinko, and even I'm going to read a little bit from Tony Perkins. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But this is a perfect time as we go to a break. I know that when we have people like Gary Bauer and Phil Robertson on, nobody makes a phone call because they want to hear what's going on. So let's, if we can now, as we go to a break, say, if you've been waiting to the last section of the last hour on Thursday, you are up to it.
You're here.
You are here. So let me encourage you that if you have not written down this number, write it down right now, 800-347-5151. Better yet, simply call it right now. I know some of you might be driving, so you'd have to call in just a few minutes, but please take the time to give us a call. You are, again, pledging to support this ministry. You don't have to have all the money right now, but I hope some of you might want to get this flash drive that we're making available for $1 a day.
Or more.
Yeah. So, again, you may not be able to write a check for $360, although you can. But $1 a day, $30 a month, and we'll put that in the mail to you.
Yes, we will.
Let's take a break. We will come back and talk about some of these controversies that Phil Robertson's been talking about right after this.
Point of View Truth Team on Changing Truth in Uncertain Times.
Hi, this is Lee Strobel, author of The Case for Christ and my new book, The Case for Miracles. You know, one of the best ways that we can grow in our ability to understand why we believe what we believe is to get an ongoing dose of God's truth into our lives. And one of the best ways of all to do that, Kerby Anderson does a tremendous job of giving us a regular diet of evidence, of logic, of God's truth from His Word. so that we can continue to do what 1 Peter 3:15 tells us, to always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks us to give the reason for the hope that we have, and to do it gently and with respect. So I am a huge fan of Kerby. I'm a huge fan of Point of View. I know that you probably are as well. That's why you're listening, and I hope you'll get behind them, support them, so that this ministry can continue on into the future and flourish even more next year than this year.
Lee Strobel, and again, he encourages you to support this ministry. And one of the things we want to do is every once in a while alert you to a problem so that you know what are the issues, and maybe even give you some talking points. So for the next couple of minutes, I want to do that because you've been hearing about, and here's a piece from Tony Perkins, who's been on the program with us before, Family Research Council, about the fact that Netflix is drawing all sorts of criticism for hosting and promoting the film called Cuties, which sexualizes 11-year-old girls. Points out that Senator Ted Cruz has written a letter to the Attorney General Bill Bauer really wanting to investigate whether they broke any federal laws related to child pornography. My argument has always been you don't always have to stick your head in a sewer to know what's down there, and you don't even have to watch the you watched the trailer a minute ago.
Well, about a minute of it.
It's
and
just so awful.
I started tearing up, to be honest with you, because it was just absolutely evil.
And so, again, we're going to try to give you some talking points in case you have somebody say, what's all this all about? And, and of course, Senator Josh Hawley in Missouri has written a letter to the CEO of Netflix and all the rest. And one of the arguments that I thought was very well done by Katrina Trinko is, we had that hashtag Me Too movement. Mm-hmm. And that was where Hollywood supposedly learned the lesson about treating women well, not treating them as sex objects and all that kind of stuff. And then along comes Netflix defending Cuties, a movie that shows female child actresses in sexually progressive activities and all the rest. And again, I love what she says because there have been some people very critical of this, not just on the right. She talks about how people make fun of, you Christians and you conservatives, but Nancy Pelosi's daughter, Christine Pelosi, wrote, hi, Netflix, from a customer and also a former district attorney that dealt with this whole issue of child abuse sexual assault unit. And she says, this movie, Cuties, hypersexualized girls my daughter's age, no doubt to the delight of pedophiles like the ones I prosecuted. So it isn't just, individuals there. Of course, I can mention a number of others that are on the left. And yet, we always hear, Brad, about, silence is violence. And it's amazing the silence that we get from her mother, Nancy Pelosi, or even more so, as she points out, the silence from the Obamas that have a multi-million-dollar deal with Netflix. You heard it here. And so she ends by simply saying, the left likes to talk a good game about being on the right side of history, implying that those of us that aren't liberal are not on the right side of history. But so far, they seem to be on the wrong side of history. And just real quickly, before we once again remind people that we're in the midst of Truth Team, our good friend Dr. Jim Dennison, who's been on the program with us many times before, his piece today in the Daily article goes into some detail, and you can read it because I cannot read these on the air.
That's right.
From the Internet Movie Database of what these girls are shown doing. Their body parts and the sexting and all the things that are part of that as well. And then simply reminding us that, now we have all sorts of members of Congress that are calling for the Justice Department to take action. One representative who is Tulsi Gabbard. Remember, she ran for the presidency on the Democratic side, and she warned that the movie, she said, will certainly whet the appetite of pedophiles and help fuel the child sex trafficking trade, and actually dropped her subscription to Netflix. I mentioned Christine Pelosi, who is, of course, the daughter of Nancy Pelosi. And the National Center for Sexual Exploitation said, while we commend the director for exposing the threats to young girls, we are convinced that it seems to be using hypersexualization and exploitation of these young actresses. And so you say, how do I respond to this as a Christian? Sexual exploitation of children is wrong because in Psalm 127 it says children are a heritage of the Lord.
That's right.
So I just want to give you some talking points because you're going to hear people say, what about this? You guys are overreacting. No, people on the left and the right, people that understand how the sexualization of children is dangerous, are really speaking out. And if nothing else, you don't need to go watch the trailer. You don't need to go watch the movie.
No.
Of course, we've had a number of people been on this program that have watched the movie, so they can speak to that with even more authority than we can. And just as an illustration, again, why you need to support Point of View.
That's right. This is a great example. The last 3.5 minutes, you absolutely hit the nail on the head of why Point of View exists. Why do we get up in the morning and do this every day? There's a reason for that. And there's a lot of people standing with us, and we want to thank them as we hear from them talking about Point of View.
Point of View Truth Team.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. I'm 23 years old, and I used to be very involved in politics on the way radical far left, which, as you were saying, has views that are mainstream among Democrats today. When I got the Holy Ghost, the Lord opened my eyes to many truths, mainly the general moral decline of the country, which I used to advocate for before God changed my heart and mind. So, and when Christ found me, I started to focus on God's kingdom, but I still have major concerns about what happens in this country politically. And I just want to say thank you to your radio program because it's really refreshing and appreciated. And thank you to God as well.
The thing that Point of View does is that they have looked at culture, they analyze it, and then they put it through the lens of the Christian perspective. And so that in and of itself is so rare. It is very biblical to do what you're doing.
Thank you to Point of View, opening my eyes over the last several years to so many different people that I follow now that I used to never follow. So thank you for opening up the truth.
I want to just tell you, I love your show. I listen every day. It's fantastic, the stuff that y'all bring out that other news shows and other people don't.
Point of View Truth Team.
Looking at culture from a biblical point of view, trying to equip you so that we can empower you to stand for truth. And we talked about light and darkness with Phil Robertson. And if you want to talk about darkness, that's this Netflix movie, isn't it?
It is. You know, these are the ages of my granddaughters. So it gets real personal. And I was almost crying today reading some of the stuff you've been referring to. And we're asking you to stand with us, won't you please? We want to say thanks to New Mexico and Michigan for checking in.
Hey, we finally heard from them.
First time, yes.
Yeah, we're down to a few.
That's right. And so we are just interested in having you become part of the Truth Team. It's $1 a day, $30 a month, $360 for the year. And again, a gift of any amount would be welcomed. The $1,000 gift would be great. Couple of those. 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. You know, we're only a couple thousand away from being where we need to be today. So let's get to the phone, shall we? Or go to the website, pointofview.net, pointofview.net. Let's hear from you because the phones will be going after the program.
They certainly will. And let's just mention that because we're down to the last few minutes. And if you can actually join with us, we appreciate that. We will still answer the phones after we get off. And tomorrow, of course, we have Penna Dexter, Kelly Shackelford. Foster Freeze will be with us. Of course, we'll still have Brad. But if you've been waiting, don't wait any longer. Give us a call, 800-347-5151. If you want to find some of the articles we've talked about there at the website, pointofview.net, and stop on that button that says donate and help us out. 1-800-347-5151. The website is, again, pointofview.net. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow right here on Point of View.
Everything you do should reflect who you are. The way you spend your time, your posts on social media, the investments you make for your retirement and for the future of our nation. Point of View Radio keeps you and countless people informed in a time when you almost need a personal research assistant to see if what you heard on the news is really true. Our team is here to help, but we need your help right now as this week heads to an end. We need monthly team members, what we call our Truth Team, as we head into the last part of 2020. It's been a unique year, to say the least, and unfortunately, it's likely to get even crazier. Make sure that you and others have the information you need to reflect who you are and to bring blessing to our land. And remember, as Kerby said, today your gift will be matched, doubled. Visit pointofview.net/team or call 1-800-347-5151. Unchanging truth in uncertain times. Point of View Radio, pointofview.net/team, and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.